Right, let's bash on with part 9. I just want to get this finished now. It's becoming a bit of a chore, to be honest, but I want to get it all on video and I want it said. So, part 9, I'm in Thurso. I'm doing my HNC degree, and I'd just taken a trip down to Bournemouth, where I bumped into a gay man called Phil, and we clicked very well. I went back home to finish my degree, and Phil and I were keeping in touch. We were great mates, really close. He was writing to me. We were speaking on the phone all the time, and it was sort of decided that once I finished my degree, I was going to go down to Bournemouth and sort of pursue my career as a chef down in Bournemouth, and sort of stay with Phil until, whatever. That was the plan, I just did my degree. I got an A, surprisingly, for my whole thing, and I put a lot of work in the last few months to pass, and my tutors helped a lot because they knew I was struggling. But I was a good cook, not the best, but good enough to get my degree. So, I shouldn't look at it as I do put myself down. I'm terrible at that. I got my degree. I did it. I spent 2 years doing it, and I did it. I got it. I was still in Thurso, and I wanted to, get down to Bournemouth as soon as I'd finished. So there was nothing to keep me at home, nothing in Thurso. I had my 2 sisters, 4 nieces who were all growing up real quick. They'd all grown up, and it was time for me to get back out of Thurso again, get away from Mum, and try a new life, and try and pursue this chef career. So that's what I did. So it was 2005 when I went to Bournemouth, and that's when I met Phil at the end of September 2005. And then about April 2006, I moved down here to Dorset, and I moved into Phil's. I got half my stuff taken and half my stuff posted. I didn't have too much stuff. I just got myself down here and immediately settled in, and myself and Phil were just delighted to sort of see each other again. And I got a job straight away there's a local campsite near here. This residency where Phil lives is more of an area for old people. It's a park home area, posh caravans, but they're static, so it's like living in a house, which is where I am now. It's a really nice area. It's quiet, and when I initially visited Bournemouth, anyway, I loved it. I absolutely adored it, and I adored sort of the surrounding areas. It felt right, just like when I moved to Edinburgh. It sort of felt right. It felt comfortable. There's places you move to where sometimes you just don't like. Like I went to Aberdeen and I hated it. I didn't like it. I get bad vibes from places. I went to Cardiff. I hated it. In my life, I've not been abroad that much. I've been to America when I was 17, just before Dad passed. That was an amazing time we had. I've been to Ireland a few times. I've not really been much of a traveller. So there I am, 2006, and I'm down in Dorset. Now this is where it sort of gets a bit complicated, because Phil and I got on really well on every level apart from a sexual level, and Phil was not my type, is not my type. So we had a problem in that we weren't partners. We weren't going to be partners, but we were very close. We had this bond, and he's a really terribly funny, outgoing guy. It was a little bit like the Gary connection back in Edinburgh, where you just click. And you can analyse it till the cows come home, but at the end of the day we had that click, but there was nothing there, no chemistry for me sexually. Now maybe if Phil was my type, I don't know what could have happened. Maybe different things could be different. I mean, now I look back and I'm sort of resentful at certain things that have happened since 2006, and I'm aware there's a great responsibility for me to take of my life. That's where I am now, which is one of the reasons I'm doing this. I moved down here, got the job at the campsite. I went from job to job very quickly within sort of 2.5 years. I had the job at the campsite over summer in 2006. I went back home to graduate and with my mum in 2006, and my nieces came to see me, and you know, I did the whole student graduation thing at a later age in my life, or later than most. So I didn't regret doing the cooking thing one thing. It took taking 2 years to become a chef, to get the degree. So I went from the campsite job down to a beef eater joint, which is, I managed to secure all these jobs very close to where I lived. I've always been lucky like that. Hence one of the reasons why I'm in my 20s and I've still not driven. I've not got a car. I've never been interested in driving, but I've never had the need to commute. So I've always, in Edinburgh was great for public transport. Down here, getting a car was going to be on the agenda at some point, but I was lucky enough to get jobs. So I had the job at the campsite, job at a beef eater grill. I had to leave that again, mental health, and I moved on. I then got a job at a place in Wimborne, which is a sort of country parlour, where I was doing the lunches and Sunday roasts, and that was a good experience, but it was family owned, and I worked with someone who was very friendly with the owners, and she was a witch. And I won't name names, but she had it in for me. She had it in for everyone who worked there. She was just a nightmare. I left because that woman was evil, purely evil. My next stage, let me quickly sort of fill you in with Phil. When I moved down here, Phil had come out of a relationship. Here where I live now, he lived with someone called Jeff, and Jeff had left him the year before I met Phil. So Phil was just come out of this long-term relationship, and Jeff had left. I didn't know why. Phil just said he'd moved on. That's it. He'd lived here for about 20 years nearly. A long time with Phil, and they were partners, and Jeff moved out. So it was convenient. The whole thing was convenient for me to move down and to start, you know, this life as a chef, and I had here to stay, and it seemed right. Everything seemed right. So there I am at Pampill Parlour. I quit because this woman was an absolute cow, and my next job was going to be I was going to move away from Phil, and I was offered this job in a new hotel that was up and coming in Farnham called Hotel de Vie. And this was a new venture by this couple of guys who were married and had loads of money, and they wanted to open a hotel where it was a hotel for couples, for lovers, and it was a bit sort of erotic themed. And it was I went there for an interview, stayed the night, and they offered me the job. So it was a big risk, and I said to Phil, so I'd moved, this was 2000 and the end of 2007, so I was making a big move to live in this hotel and be head chef, and I was very nervous about it, very nervous, but I knew that I needed to do something with my chef career, or I had to try it. So I'd committed to a live-in job. It was a really interesting place. It was just incredible. It only had 9 rooms, 9 rooms at that time, yeah. And there was a little secret area for kinky things that only certain people knew about. It was very much aimed at straight couples who might be swingers or into a bit of kink, a bit of slap and tickle. But I'd committed to this live-in job, there, and it never felt like I had time off. That was the problem. I'd signed a contract with them to actually get shares in this as well if it was a successful venture, and to be the head chef and to do breakfast, lunch and dinner. Now that meant there was no escape for me, because I was up at 6 a.m. doing breakfast, then lunch, and then doing the dinners for the guests who wanted dinners. Or it was so new and the owners were so, if somebody wanted extra dinners, it was just like, well, Keith will do it. So I was like on call all the time. I'd agreed that I would have 1.5 days off a week, and I wasn't ready for this kind of chef commitment. I had 2 Polish girls. We lived at the top of the hotel, and I lived with these 2 Polish girls who came all the way from Poland, very pretty, and they came to do the beds and cleaning and a bit of reception, and they were the waitresses, so I was sort of their boss in some ways. At that time also I met another guy called Keith, an older chap who lived in Chichester, and we met through, I was on, I think, a gay chat line or something, and Keith came along to Farnham. Have I even told you where I moved to? I moved to this place Farnham, which is in Surrey, and it's a very sort of affluent, lovely area. So that's where this hotel was, in Farnham. So this guy Keith was coming along to see me when I had a day off, and we were going around, going to Southampton to see movies. He was an old artist who used to work for the BBC and do sets, and he was just full of energy. He was like a little child, you know. He's so funny. And we'd go to the theatre, we'd go to National Trust houses. We went all over England whenever I had a little bit of time off. And I realised that not only was the job driving me nuts, Keith realised that I had a bit of a drink problem, because before we went to the cinema I would have a couple of pints to settle my nerves, and straight at the cinema I'd be on the drink again, and that was happening a lot. I was also gambling, and gambling is going to be I haven't mentioned gambling enough in this. Maybe I'll sort of focus that more on the next section. But this job was not to be. One evening I came back with a chap I knew in Farnham called John, and John was a great guy. He's a good friend, and I took him back. We got a bit tipsy, and I said, "Oh, just stay the night in the hotel." Now our bosses had told me and the Polish girls, you cannot have anyone to stay, and that was the rules, and I sort of went with it. But I said, this one time, brought back John, and the girls went mad. I was drunk and I told them to fuck off and blah blah blah. And I said, I'm quitting tomorrow, fuck you. And I did. I quit the next morning. I did half the breakfast, told them to get on with it. I phoned a friend I had in Bournemouth, in the Dorset area, called Glyn, and Glyn, being a complete star, came and picked me up, and that was it. So I lasted probably 7 months there. We're now into 2008, and about March, just the end of March, Glyn came in 2008 and picked me up and took me back, and then I came back to Phil's to stay again. So there I am again, lost. I've tried something, I've failed, and again, you know, it's just a pattern with me that sort of seems to be going on, and I failed. I felt like a failure. I wrote that down here. I've booked tickets to go to see Neil Young that year, who's a musical hero of mine. And so me, Phil, Glyn, and John, the guy from Farnham, we all went to Dublin in the spring 2008, and I'm unemployed and I've got a little bit of money left, not much. We went to Dublin, Malahide Castle, and had a blast. Then I'm gonna leave this bit for the next section because it's 2008 and it's more death, losing a friend, good friend of mine, and again me trying to get back into work. But that's me. I'd made the transition from moving from Thurso all the way down to the bottom of England, trying my hand at the, the chefing, having 4 different jobs, one as a head chef, and I'd failed all within 2.5 years. There I was, 2008, middle of 2008, summer was coming, and I was unemployed and unhappy again.